This from a December 2017 New York Times article about women in politics. Quote, Stephanie Chirac, the president of Emily's List, the largest national organization devoted to electing female candidates, said, in the 10 months before the election in 2016, about 1,000 women contacted her organization about running for office. Since the election, she said, the number of women has exploded to more than 22,000. Tahirah is a truly progressive candidate and one of the many courageous, intelligent women who are part of that explosion and who refuse to allow the continuation of a political system dominated by mostly white men. She is helping to redefine the norms and to undo the establishment as she defeats Richie Neal in 2018. We are so grateful that she is here today to speak to our communities. Thank you. FCCPR, or Franklin County Continuing the Political Revolution, evolved from a grassroots effort to elect Senator Bernie Sanders as president in 2016. Since the 2016 election, FCCPR has grown into a movement of nearly 350 dues-paying members who convene monthly during our General Assembly held at the Guiding Star Grange in Greenfield, when all members are provided with updates from our 7 task forces: campaign finance, civil rights, climate change, education, labor, peace, and single-payer health care. These task forces meet on a regular basis at our member-supported office at 345 Main Street in Greenfield, just below Greenfield Coffee, and tackle issues ranging anywhere from global warming to attacks against unions. In addition, we have an 11-member coordinating committee who work together on supporting our task forces, recruiting new members, researching and providing critical information, and most importantly, encouraging our members to raise their voices on issues that concern them. FCCPR also partners with other area progressive movements to either support or oppose proposed or pending legislation, to mobilize in times of crisis and during elections. Lastly, our endorsement committee meets and makes recommendations to our membership on local, state, and soon-to-be federal elections. Of note, during our recent Greenfield municipal election, FCCPR was successful in electing 5 of our 6 endorsed candidates for local office. Otis Wheeler, who is filming this, is one of them. He was newly elected to the Greenfield Town Council. And on January 6th, we held a Democratic gubernatorial forum at the Greenfield Middle School where candidates Jay Gonzalez, Bob Massey, and Seti Warren were present. There were over 200 in attendance. I will offer more information on our endorsement committee once we close the forum. But now I want to introduce FCCPR's own Mary Melrose.
Right. Thank you, Mary Ellen. That was great. Welcome, everybody. So good to see you all here today. I'm just here to give a brief introduction to our new Congresswoman. Born in Brooklyn, Tahirah Amatul Wadud has many long-established roots in Western Mass. As a graduate of Elms College and the Western New England College School of Law, and now a Springfield resident, Ms. Amatul Wadud is an attorney whose practice focuses on domestic relations and civil rights law. She's also a member of the Massachusetts Commission for the Status of Women, where she advocates for the rights and interests of women and girls. And in addition to the many other accomplishments and qualifications that make her preferable to the current incumbent, which I'll let her talk about, she also knows how to find Franklin County. I give you the next representative for the 1st Massachusetts Congressional District, Tahirah Amatul Wadud.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mary and Mary Ellen. Thank you, Ken and David. And thank you to everyone with the Franklin County Continuing the Progressive Revolution. I came out last week or the week before last for the gubernatorial debate, and I was so impressed by the level of engagement, the care and concern of the community for their issues, and it just really got me hyped and excited to be here today and to have been invited here. Well, I'll share a little secret with you. This is my first official Meet the Candidate event. Yeah. And I wanted to get it just right, and I want to thank my campaign team and my advisors, my family, they're here, my friends, they're here for their support and also making sure that everything ran smoothly today for me. So, yes, I'm all excited. But Franklin County is, and it has always been special to our family. My parents are here, and my dad is a cross-country coach, and he's always loved running, youth sports. My brothers and sisters have played in high school sports, basketball, cross-country, track and field. And so we've always found ourselves here competing with and against the Mohawk High School students. Yeah, in cross-country especially. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful area. And so I just think over the past decade or decade and a half, how ironic it is that I'd be back here asking for your support and your vote in helping to lead this community to success and vibrance and to help us thrive. So let me just introduce myself a little bit to you all, even though I feel like I know everybody. So as you heard Mary say, I'm an attorney. I live in Springfield, and we did move here. I was born in New York City, and my parents moved us here when I was 9 years old. And they wanted to give us a better life and more opportunities. We wanted to live in a house as opposed to living in the inner city. And I was homeschooled, and the oldest of 10 kids. Many of my brothers and sisters are here today. And I got married when I was 18. And had our first child when I was 19. My husband was 21, and he was finishing up his studies at HCC. And my parents knew that I had promise and hope, and they weren't going to let the fact that I was now the mother of a toddler hold me back from getting an education. And my mother put in some time and effort into finding a program that would allow me to be a full-time student, because that was not an option. I was going to go to school full-time, and be able to take care of my little boy, who is now 24 years old. And she worked with the admissions office at Elms College, which was, there was a special project being run by Carla Oleska, who I don't know if many of you know, Dr. Carla Oleska, with the Sisters of St. Joseph at the time. And I got accepted into the college, graduated with honors, walked into that campus not knowing whether I would measure up, because I didn't have anything to really compare myself to. Got involved with everything good on campus, organized conferences, majored in paralegal studies, helped co-students succeed, and it was just a great experience. After I graduated in 1998, I went to work at MassMutual, which was big, because you always wanted to be able to leave Elms College, particularly in the paralegal department, with a strong job in the legal department of a corporation or a law firm, and I secured that. And one of my colleagues is here, and she and I, Karen and I, worked together at MassMutual for a number of years before I left. Meanwhile, my little boy was thriving. He was entering preschool, and my husband had started working at a nonprofit, and life just was really good. And while I was there, I learned about working in and for corporate America. I learned about developing a work ethic. I also realized that I was just as smart, capable, and ambitious as the attorneys for whom I worked, and that what I was getting paid, I was worth more than that. And I took advantage of a program MassMutual had where they would reimburse for some, if you went and did some continuing education. So I enrolled in law school. First person in my family to go to law school, so I figured it out as I went. By this point, I think I had 2 children. And if you know the proximity of MassMutual, the corporate office in Springfield, and Western New England University School of Law, probably a mile difference going out the back. And it was a lot of work. I continued to work full-time for the most part and go to school at night, part-time, but that's a myth because nighttime is like Monday through Thursday, 5 to 10, essentially, right? And I worked really, really hard. I passed the bar exam the first time. Yes, and that was wonderful, and didn't know that I could do that either. While I was in law school, I switched jobs, left Mass Mutual, went to work for ISO New England, the power grid operator, which is out of Holyoke. ISO oversees the electricity usage for the New England region, and I was its first and only paralegal at the time. My job was to monitor how electricity was being discussed before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And there are dockets that you needed to watch, and people and stakeholders who were interested in what was happening would submit filings. And my job was to monitor those filings and report back to the lawyers that I worked with and the engineers within the organization. And let me just tell you, it's not intuitive learning energy regulations, but I was ambitious and entrepreneurial, and I created this really great system, and I had an email system and a way of tracking. And before I ended up leaving, I had a number of followers internal to the company who thought that my little updates were great, and it helped us all become more efficient in how we, as an organization, responded to what was happening out of DC relative to the electricity usage in New England. It was also there that I learned and got an opportunity to see proposals, grassroots proposals for renewable energy suggestions. At the time, it probably wasn't high on the priority for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, but you would see people and stakeholders submit comments and ideas and proposals saying, don't forget about this. And I like that. And this was my first time experiencing that and watching that sort of advocacy. As I finished my studies and passed the bar exam at ISO New England, I was on top of the world. At this point, schooling was behind me. I think I had 4 kids at that point. I had passed the bar exam, and I decided that I wasn't going to just be a paralegal anymore. I wanted now to work for an organization that would recognize me as being a lawyer, because that's what my family and my kids and my husband and my parents and I sacrificed so much to be. And I interviewed with an organization called Western Massachusetts Legal Services at the time. Now it's known as Community Legal Aid. And I was offered a job working in family law, serving essentially low-income families that had had some experience with domestic violence. It was going to be a huge pay cut, but I'd be called lawyer. And I'd get some litigation experience, actually being in a court as an advocate, someone's hero and someone's champion. And I agonized about whether that was the right thing to do, whether I could afford a pay cut, whether it was worth it. My kids had sacrificed so long for their mother to achieve these things, only for us to walk back some of the financial progress that we had made. And with their support, I did it. And I have no regrets. Now, working at legal services, I learned a number of things. All these different jobs and experiences gave me sort of this appreciation for life that I would not have had otherwise. Working at legal services put me up close and personal with some of the desperate times that families in Western Massachusetts have and are facing. I got to see families in serious levels of poverty, serious levels of abuse, and stuck in a system and systems that just didn't serve them. And while the service I could provide was in the context of family law and helping to reconstruct families that had been broken, I also had an opportunity to use my influence to help them in other ways. Now, before I go much further, let's face it, those families are us. Right? No matter what our incomes are, no matter what our financial situations are, our social situations are, we all know families who are at risk, who are living on the margins, who are one paycheck away from devastation, who've made unfortunate choices, for whom the systems do not serve. We're not that far removed. And especially in this district, where the median income itself is only $49,000, you see how many of us teeter on that. And if you're not just right there eligible for some of those services, you're just a little ineligible so that you still struggle just as hard, right? And that gave me such a wake-up call. And in addition to going into a court system with families like this and forcing the judicial system to allow these people the rights that they have, just made me even better, even bolder. even sharper, and fearless, because not always was my clients the most popular people, nor did they always have the right situation to make a judge think that this is what should be happening with them. In 2008, the organization experienced some economic downfall because of the drop in the housing market, and I took a package and did a layoff, and I started my own business, running my own law firm, where people then, working class families who could afford me, would offer me money to do the same things I had been doing with legal services. And I found that this was great because I had a skill set and I was in demand. People knew me, they had started to hear of my reputation, and it was something I felt very confident that I could do. No advertisements, no paid commercials, all of my business is word of mouth, and since 2009 up to and including today, we've kept that business, our law practice, above water, and we are hustling for the families of Western Massachusetts. I'm in all of the courts, all in Western Mass and Worcester County, representing families. And in this capacity, I've had opportunities to see families all across the spectrum, from low income to working class to high income families, and I see again a common theme, that we all have the same sorts of struggles. So what do I see in these families? I see families that are concerned about how they're going to pay for their kids to go to college, okay? Families that are concerned about their Social Security benefits and how those will kick in when they are retirement age. Families who are concerned about health care and what options they have during the marriage and after the marriage if there's a divorce, and what Medicare and Medicaid will do for our families here. I have families who are concerned about debt, credit card debt, unequal pay between men and women. Because if I represent a woman in family court and I know that she's going to have a little bit of a harder time in the job market than maybe her spouse, who may be a man, and what that does to the financial security of women. I got a chance to appreciate that. I got a chance to weigh in and advocate on how child support guidelines are established here in the Commonwealth. There's open hearings conducted every so often, and how that impacts the family, how that impacts children and their ability to survive, the paying parent and the non-paying parent. And so those were some of the things that I actually started to internalize and really appreciate were important policies and how they impacted us. And in 2015, with the election of Donald Trump and the campaign of the presidential campaign, there was an uptick, a noticeable uptick in anti-religious sentiment. Well, in anti-everybody sentiment, let's face it. But from an anti-religious sentiment point of view, I found myself sort of in the wave of advocates who were bringing attention to the fact that religious minorities were being persecuted here in this country. And that got me on the Today Show. Who knew? Like, I didn't tell anybody. And then people said, I was on the treadmill and I saw you on the Today Show. And I was like, oh, my secret's out of the bag. Because what I tell people, and I don't always say this, but some of the work that I did, particularly advocating for the rights of Muslims, I wasn't always vocal about because I didn't want people to judge me. I didn't want them to pigeonhole me, and I didn't want to be stigmatized, right? But the Today Show just outed me, and I've never gone back since then. And it wasn't just Muslims who were experiencing hate. It was our Jewish brothers and sisters. It was our Christian brothers and sisters. We had synagogues that were desecrated. We had Dylan Roof massacre people in their church worshiping, right? And we weren't really hearing pushes for the use of the hate crime statute in the prosecution of those cases. And I became a very vocal advocate for aggressive litigation against people who stepped on the rights of people in the process of their worship. What I didn't tell you is that I come from a Christian family. My grandparents were Christian, my aunts and uncles were, and my parents became Muslim when I was a toddler. So I grew up in an existence that was very harmonious among the Abrahamic faith. So none of this about tolerance of religions new to me. But when I got to 2015, I realized that I was quite unique in that realization and that my experience was different. And that also gave me the ability to be unapologetic in my advocacy around those issues. But as I did that, and I ended up getting an invitation to the White House for a program called Celebrating Religious Pluralism, and I didn't get to meet President Obama, but I got to meet some of his high-level and senior administration as we talked about the uptick in hate crimes. And we talked about the uptick in hate crimes against all communities, the LGBT communities, the religious communities, faith-based communities, racial violence. And I expressed then, even at that event, that you must use the hate crime statute in the prosecution of these individuals. Don't be content to just charge them with murder or vandalism. Enhance that with the use of the hate crime statute, which didn't really win me a lot of friends. But my job was not necessarily to win friends, but to tell people we are in desperate times, and this is what we need to do. That work actually got me a lot of invitations locally to talk about interfaith unity and interfaith solidarity. And I got on the trail, and then people wanted to just hear me talk about stuff. They wanted to hear me talk about civic engagement, voting, women's issues, children's health issues. And in that process, in the past 24 months, I have heard literally from thousands of our friends and families and our neighbors about what it's like to be us. And that is when I realized that people feel desperate, hopeless, ignored, right? And that they want a reason to be galvanized towards positivity, towards unity, and to know each other. It's also when I started to realize that our federal representation just wasn't sufficient, wasn't filling the role of moral leadership. Regardless of what your politics are, when things are bad, you should be able to look to your federal officials, to your president, for some calming aspect of moral leadership. And we weren't getting that. We don't feel it now. I'm also, right? I've also had an opportunity, because of some of the volunteer work that I have done, to travel around the country, the Commonwealth, and hear from people. And over again, the same themes about what was impacting the families when I started working at Legal Services, to what I started hearing when I talked about interfaith solidarity. And interfaith solidarity also includes people who don't claim a faith, but want to claim a community. And I'd meet with those folks too, at the mosque, at the synagogue, at the church. It was real. People just want to be connected on the basis of community. And that's when we spread out all the books, looked at all the numbers, looked to the left, looked to the right, asked these kiddos of mine and my husband and my family, are you ready to sacrifice again? Right? Are you ready to do this again with me? And that is take a very bold and scary leap towards seeing if we should run for the 1st Congressional District of Massachusetts. And overwhelmingly, the support was there, and the message was yes. And that's why I'm here. So my passion, as you hear, is about families, it's about sustainability, it's about self-sufficiency. As the oldest sibling, I'm the one that insisted that my brothers and sisters needed to know how to make their own peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I did not want to be responsible for having to make them. Yep, man, my mom's here, she knows, I'll tell you. She'd say, oh, make a mess in the kitchen, why don't you just make it? And my sister's smiling, she knows. But that's because I believe that if you teach people and give them the opportunity to do things that they need to be able to do for themselves, we all benefit. And that's how I've always lived my life. I've lived my life letting other people shine and figuring out where their strengths were and encouraging them and being the wind beneath their wings, because we all benefit. When I look at this district and get to hear about the discontent in certain pockets, and ladies and gentlemen, it's not just the rural communities that feel discontent, it's many of your neighbors in the inner city community, many Black and brown folks, many many people are disenfranchised, and how I kept saying to myself, what I have to do is work to unify the entire district so that folks from Springfield, Holyoke, Chicopee can hear what the concerns are right here in this rural community and hear that they are flip sides of the exact same coin. And when we start to realize that we're not going to let people fragment us into being othered or compartmentalized and instead treat us as one family, we are an unstoppable force. Yeah. So among my platform issues, and I'll talk about some of those in a minute, but really what I want to do is I want to hear from you, because in my role, I see myself as running to be your servant, not to be your leader, but to lead us through rocky waters. And I want to hear from you what it is that we need to be doing and how I need to do it. And we'll talk about the platform in a minute, but some of the ground game includes making sure that I put together task force. So I'm going to have an opioid task force, I'm going to have a rural communities task force, an urban communities task force, an education task force. And if you are interested in joining those task force and advising, please, when you just see any of the folks with the volunteer badges, and let them know to write your names down. I'd appreciate it. Yolanda's here from Springfield. She's going to help me sort of mobilize the Springfield initiative. And I want to be able to, when we come out to different communities, bring representatives from each of the districts to these types of meetings so that everybody gets to hear, not from me, but from each other, because the federal government sees us as one neighborhood. So we have to start seeing ourselves as one neighborhood. Yeah. My issues, and I mean, I don't want to sound like a canned politician, but some of the priorities, and you might have heard me, discuss them, weave them in here, but my priorities right now are to increase the economic viability of our district. I see that as happening in a number of different ways, including, but not limited to, making sure we have high-speed internet here in the communities that do not have it. And part of the way that we need to do that is to make sure our entire neighborhood, the 1st Congressional District, realizes that so many of us do not have it. Like, people don't understand that you're using satellite, or you just go without, or using 1996 dial-up like it's AOL. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. You're experiencing gaps in education, gaps in wages, gaps in skills, brain drain because students don't want to stay in a place where they can't access the world. And that's unacceptable as well. I'm concerned, of course, about health care and making sure we have a sensible Medicare for all plan so that we're not sitting here every few years wondering if our children and if our spouses and if we are going to be covered for whatever medical issues we have. That's real. I'm also concerned about the opioid crisis and drug addiction in general. And I'm going to tell you how I look at these issues, not just as political issues. I look at them as human rights issues, as social justice issues. I look at the opioid crisis not just as an opioid crisis, but I'm looking at it as a crack crisis too, as a cocaine crisis as well, as a war on drugs issue, a criminal justice reform issue, because we cannot talk about dealing with the opioid crisis until we make amends for how we failed to deal with the crack crisis in our community in Springfield, in Holyoke, in Chicopee, in West Springfield. And we need to develop a clinical and compassionate model for all addiction. And once we deal with drug addiction in that way for everybody, again, we get back to that point of unstoppable. But until they can say, well, you have an opioid crisis issue, we're going to deal with you one way, opioid crisis, and we're going to deal with that crisis one way, and this has a crack issue, and we're going to deal with that a different way, we're not going to be able to make progress. We shouldn't be here today. We should not be here today struggling with this as if it's the first time we've ever had a drug problem in this country. It's not new. It's not new. But we can't get there until we change how we talk about it. So those are some of my issues. I encourage you to ask your questions and let me know what you're thinking and what I need to think. And I'm glad to be here.
So we sort of have a kind of a fast and loose process here. So I'm just you're gonna raise your hand. I'm gonna call on you. If you feel like you need a microphone, you can come up. We only have one mic. We are in the country after all, without broadband. Okay. So so anyone who wants to ask a question of Tahirah, please raise their hand. And if you would, please say your name and what town you're from, right there. You would stand up, please. If you feel like you need a mic, you can come up. Okay.
Conway. My question to you, would you caucus with the progressive wing of the House of the U.S. Congress, the House of Representatives?
Yes, I would say that would be a good, sort of a good collaboration for us. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think it's great. They put together a budget. Of course, Speaker Ryan Squashy, he has that authority to speak with the House. But they have a whole budget that has never seen the light of day on the floor. So my question, I think it's a great budget. It speaks to all the things you are speaking about.
Yep. Yes.
Which obviously would address the opioid crisis.
Yes.
That alone.
It sure would.
Certainly scaling back on military spending, more on education.
Yep.
I chair our town's finance committee in Conway, and since Reagan was elected, for all towns across the country, 40% used to be allocated from the state to Chapter 70 million public schools, now it's down to 20%. So that has to reverse, because property taxes are killing us.
Right.
Everywhere.
That's right. That's right. And what we are trying to make sure we do is go back to centering people, like realizing what people's day-to-day needs are, what their survival needs are. And regardless of what label you put on us, whether you call it progressive or not, that's what has to happen. And we can't relent until it does. So I agree with you. And I'll look into a little bit about who's on the caucus, what have you. Thanks for your question.
It's really expensive. You state your name and Tony Atkins, Springfield, Mass. It's very expensive to go to UMass these days. And the University of Massachusetts and the whole university system was set up to educate everybody, the working class and everybody. And now it's become that you can't afford to go to UMass. We have a good community college system which tries to help people move into public education. But what would you think about having free higher public education?
Thank you. Not only is it expensive to go to the University of Massachusetts, it's also very competitive and difficult. Remember the days where it was a safe choice when your kids were applying for college or you were applying for college? It's very competitive, and it boxes out a lot of people from being able to get into those universities. So I would totally be supporting increased funding to prioritize access to those universities and making it affordable and accessible, particularly to those here in our community, because we need it, because we are inclined to experience the brain drain that I talked about earlier, where our young people are leaving and not coming back. We have a great university. We have a great university system, public university system here. We also have a great private university system here in Western Massachusetts. And we need to make sure that the educational institutions appreciate that and ask them to prioritize our students, because it doesn't make sense to have our kids here and then leave. It just doesn't do anything to grow the economy and to increase the longevity of us being able to develop strength, political strength, and just the numbers. And we want to see our kids and our grandkids stay here and thrive, and we need to give it to them. So thank you for that question.
Right back. Mary Melrose, I live in Charlotte. This is almost more of a philosophical question. One of the problems that I have with the incumbent is my feeling that he always plays it safe, and that he's playing to his fellow members of Congress, or perhaps to his donors, as much as he is to us. And I think that really permeates Congress right now. There's a real unwillingness, it seems to me, to tackle tough issues and controversial issues and do the heavy lifting with legislation. There's too much counting on a Supreme Court decision, for example, to solve these problems that the legislators don't seem able to solve for the last 10, 15 years. So my question is, if you're talking about, I'll just use one example, but there are many more, LGBT rights, which do not exist in law at the federal level at all. And nobody is willing to do that kind of heavy lifting. So as the most junior member of Congress, because that's where it starts. As the most junior member of Congress, what are some strategies and tactics that you would use to start changing that culture within the Congress?
That's a great question. Well, in the first instance, I'm not afraid to be the only one for obvious reasons. I am the only one like me in a lot of my circles. And I'm brave, and I have courage, and I'm not afraid to take that stance and to hold on to it as if our lives depend on it, because for a lot of us, it does. The other thing is, as the most junior member of Congress, I also stand out. I have an interesting presentation, an interesting story, and I would hope that people would be drawn to support and to listen to your representative just because of that. And we also live in a moment of sound bites. So the loudest senator, the loudest congressman is getting played on YouTube, right? So who knows what being the only one like me could do to amplify the causes of the 1st Congressional District. Additionally, as a lawyer, even though I love litigating, I love being in front of judges. I love convincing them to see things my client's way. I love having trials and presenting evidence to them and getting the order in the mail that sort of outlines exactly what I thought should have happened for my client. And sometimes it doesn't work that way, but I can usually predict where it's going. I am also quite conciliatory, meaning that where I see that I can advance my client's interest based on commonalities and agreements, I do. 90% of my cases resolve by agreement, and I never force my clients into a position that they don't believe in or force them to accept something that that sort of compromises their position. And that's how I feel I would be as a congresswoman as well. I work for the people. What is it that my constituents want? That's what we will work for, and our constituents run across the whole gerrymandered district, not just in one little pocket, and I will never, ever forget that. Never forget that. And I've been doing it for 11 years. I've been doing advocacy for people and letting my clients lead for 11 years, so this is not new to me. It's just a different area, a different venue, and a different level of influence, but the sort of the spirit is the same. You're welcome.
And then right there. Just stand and say your name and where you're from. Diane Collins from Shelburne.
Hi there.
Going back to educational, they were talking about your math. And I was unclear about you were talking about.
Could she speak to the mic, please?
Hang on. Do you want to talk to the mic just to raise it first? No, you just come on. See, now you can use it. Okay.
Hi, I'm Diane Poland from Shelburne Falls. Going back to education, you were talking about UMass and talking about making it more accessible. It was unclear to me whether you're talking about just financial, something which I am all for. I mean, it should be free, like it used to be, pretty much. Or are you talking about, because you said it was very competitive, are you talking about lowering standards? Because I would be really opposed to that.
So when I was accepted into Elms College, I got in by way of an alternative admissions process, not a lowered standard, but a review of my qualities as an individual, a more specific look at what strengths I had and could bring to the college, because I was a non-traditional student. So I would ask that our universities look for the student, the applicant who offers promise that might look a little differently than whether or not they did great on their SATs. Definitely not looking to lower standards, looking to make it an inclusive environment, taking advantage of student strengths who might ordinarily be ignored. And I graduated from Elms College with honors, having 2 children. And if I didn't go through that alternative admissions process, I may not have been accepted into the school.
Right over here, I pointed to something. Do you speak loudly or do you need to come up No, I think I'm fine.
You got it, okay.
I'm Lady Ullman, I'm from Goshen.
Nice to meet you.
And I'd like to go back to this campaign that you are just stepping into, and hear a little more about your strategies. I work with Waynesburg Indivisibles. We've tried hard to get Neil out to do a town hall. He absolutely doesn't do that. What you're doing now, he would not do, but I'd like to hear time, because when I've sort of said little things to people, they say, oh, well, Neil's in such an important position now in Congress. You know, it wouldn't be smart to replace him. I want you to tell me what your strategy is, what I answer to that.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
that you can win.
Yes. So we can win. Numerically, we can win. You know that we have a very low voter turnout. 17% or something along the lines of whatever you look at, it's very, very low. So, but some of my strategists suggest that the apathy comes from a sense of hopelessness in the federal seat. So if we give people a reason to turn out, then we can increase voter turnout across the district. But particularly also, we have to look at the inner cities where the population number is there, and we need to convince those voters to turn up, not only for the general election, but for the primary. Because right now, we do or die at the primary, which is September 4th. There is a little bit of an interesting barrier in the date, even the date of September 4th, and that it's the day after Labor Day, right? So that's a struggle for a lot of working families. What are they doing? They're getting their kids' haircut because they start school that week. They're sending their kids off to college. They're traveling. So we have all these different steps that we have to overcome just to make sure that our numbers turn out to be able to vote in the primary. So that is a key strategy in this election. Additionally, you were talking about the strategy. So additionally, in addition to getting out the vote, it's making sure that people know that I'm here, that I'm accessible, and that I'm not afraid to come and answer the tough questions, even though I'm not a polished politician. I also think that it's a little bit of a myth to say that this person is unbeatable. It's a myth. 17% voter turnout, if you converted that number to an approval rating, even if 100% of those 17%, that's still an abysmal approval rating, if you look at it like that, right? The funding of our opponent comes majority from corporations, big pharma, manufacturers of war weapons, right? We need to talk about that. We need to talk about the votes against the Farm Bill in 2014, which was catastrophic, not just for farms where people think rows of corn, but for the quality of life for those who live in rural communities. We need to also look at the freshening up of the Farm Bill that's going to occur in 2018 and push for that high-speed internet to be considered in that Farm Bill, some funding for that. So our strategy is to truly get to know the issues of the people, connect with the people, encourage them to come out and vote, let them know that there is something to be hopeful for. While we cannot solve all of the problems in one day, you will be able to wake up every morning proud of your representative, which a lot of people right now are not. So it is a winnable race by the numbers, and it is with hard work, and we are going to work hard to do that. And also, just to deal with the myth of he's unbeatable, we have a 10% unemployment rate in a state that only has a 3% unemployment rate. So why is our unemployment rate so high when we have someone who's been in office for nearly 3 decades? If you're in that office for 3 decades and you're this ranking member of this committee, how does it reflect on the men and women and children of our district? How is our district not the most on-point district in the country? Why are we sacrificing ourselves for one person's career? And why does that make him unbeatable? Why does that make him unbeatable? Hi there.
I'm Mary Alice Francis from Williamsburg.
Nice to meet you.
First, I want to say thank you for coming here.
Oh,
As
you-
you've alluded to, as defined our current conversation.
You're welcome.
And I'm a big supporter of net neutrality.
Yes.
I've seen on your website that you are also a supporter, so I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And for those who don't know, net neutrality just means no discrimination on the internet. And my question for you is what we can do out here where we live to support your candidacy and to help with the campaign.
Oh, that's great. Continue to do what you're doing. Continue to be active and engaged citizens supporting this organization. Continue to tell people that they have an option. Continue to tell people that they have an option and that I care, again, about the issues that actually matter. Like when you spread out your bills or you're making your menu for the week, I'm doing the same thing in my kitchen, and I'm concerned about the price of milk. I'm concerned about net neutrality. I'm concerned about whether I can pay the internet bill, even though we have it in Springfield. It's very expensive. Let people know that they have an option. I'm also not trying to take away people who are loyal to the congressman. We can win even without their votes. I would like their votes, but I'm not trying to disrupt that. I'm trying to get to the people who want me as their choice because I want them as my constituents. I want people who are thinking, maybe this is a better option. I want to convince them that yes, I am. And I can still smile and be friends with people who are loyal to the person who sat in the seat for 29 years. I did an interview the other day on the radio. And I explained it was Friday, I was a little punchy, I was tired. And I said to the interviewer, I remember my mom taking me down to Court Square in Springfield when our congressman was the mayor. And like to a rally, and I had heart eyes for him, like, oh my gosh, he's wonderful, he's powerful, he's awesome, and he's done 29 years worth of public service, and I appreciate that. But at this point, it's time for us to get representation in that truly reflects the interests of the people and who's not beholden to other individuals, other organizations, other donors for what happens after 39 years of service. So I have no hard feelings towards him. I'm just ready to start putting us first from a very real point of view.
So we are being filmed live, and we were told that some of the folks that are watching us in the internet world, which we don't have a lot of here, right? Sorry. To either have Tahirah restate your question, or if you would come up to the mic and speak into the mic. So there was a hand raised right here. So you want to come into the mic? Okay. And your name and town. Yeah.
I'm Peggy Davis, and I live in Coleraine. And I'm interested to hear your thinking about the whole immigrant question. And if you were in Congress right now, what would you be doing?
Thank you. So I'll just to frame the question a little bit, you want to hear my position on immigration? So it might go without saying that I would support DACA, and I would support a pathway to citizenship for DACA recipients, like unequivocally, hands down, it matters. Some of the polling, when you read some of the articles, and most of the American people support DACA, but when you read some of the articles and the way the polling is done, they'll say, do you support making a pathway of citizenship for kids whose parents brought them here illegally? And I just get a little annoyed with even that terminology, because not all DACA recipients were brought here illegally. Some of them came with their families who might have been students or here on work visas, and the families themselves situated the adults and the older kids with their paperwork and became citizens and said, oh, little Johnny's only 3 years old, we have time, and they may never have come back for that child. So not every child who came here in that situation was here necessarily illegally. And so that just means that we have to continue to have a level of compassion for the DACA recipients. But I love talking about immigration also because it's one of those things that do not directly impact our family. I'm African American, like going back to the slave trade, but it's given me an opportunity, and doing some of the talks that I've been doing for the past 2 years, I'm always approached when I speak at colleges and universities by international students. At the end of those talks, they hang around. And especially after the immigration ban last year, and they all say, should I go home for Christmas? Do you think I can come back? Do you think that if something happened, my mother would be able to get here? And of course, I don't have answers. Nobody has answers. But what I do know is that if we don't get our act together around immigration, these great universities that welcome in so many international students are going to start losing those international students. And those international students are not all on scholarship. Some of them bring big checks. Their parents are writing $40,000 a semester for some of those students to be here. So it's going to have an implication if we don't make our country's immigration policies welcoming. As you may know, even the Ontario School District in Canada will not allow students to travel to the United States for school trips because they didn't want their students experiencing drama at the border. So we, especially here in Western Massachusetts, where we have so many, not only universities and colleges, but prep schools, high schools that bring in international students, our immigration policy matters from beyond just the obvious, right? Wouldn't it be horrible if it continued to spiral out of control the way it is? So I support fair immigration, making sure that people feel welcomed and know what to expect. That's the other thing. People have to understand what to expect so that their 17-year-olds who are here aren't asking me whether they should go home and whether they'd be welcome back for the spring semester if they did.
Come on up to the mic. Or you can repeat the questions. Mike? Got it?
Hi. Oh, okay. One of the members of the Buckland Energy Committee was here earlier and had to leave. And I know that she would have wanted to ask you if you would be on our side in terms of alternative and renewable energy, which the current government is basically doing everything they can to get rid of.
The answer is yes, and I know what that side is. So we all know that Franklin County is a pioneer around issues involving renewable energy. Some of the rock stars have come from here. So what we have is we have willpower, we have expertise, we have inspiration and motivation to be able to make renewable energy sourcing the primary way that we function, and we can do it. But we do need some more support in our congressional leadership. I was talking to a friend the other day about how do we do that? How do we do that from day one? How do we make sure that people have access to solar panels? They're so expensive. Or people whose, they're very expensive, and people who may not be able to afford being involved in programs like that. And he and I just talked about it. We said, we have families who get fuel assistance for oil or different aspects of supplementation. So maybe what we can do is invest in solar panels and make that a form of fuel assistance. Families who may not be able to afford it, make it more affordable to working class families. Have our government really invest in providing these tools and pieces of equipment that could have significant and sustainable change. We have to also make sure that people who are not aware of how important renewable energy is become aware. Like right now, we're talking about people who are just trying to survive and get through day-to-day life, but we have to have those conversations and bring people along because, again, numbers matter. And it's not just what happens here in the rural communities, it's also going to impact what happens in the inner city communities because all of us stand to benefit from a strong renewable energy program. And we can use our colleges, our universities, our public high schools to educate our students for jobs of this century, which is going to be as leaders in this field, not only from the perspective of job development, but that could encompass all sorts of things from laying renewable energy type of tools to teaching, writing books, consulting. Like, we can do this. We have the willpower, we have the framework, but we need the congressional support, and I promise you that I will work to do that for us.
No, just say that people that are watching can't hear unless you're on a mic. So if you don't mind coming, that's great. Sorry. Thank you.
Question about your campaign and how it is that you're going to win. I'm wondering whether or not it's your hope or intention to try to get debates with Neil, and to the extent that you would try to do that, how could we assist you? I would say while I was sitting there, I suddenly had an image of any event where Neil is appearing, that there would be silhouettes of you that others of us would have. Where is she? Where is she? Anyways.
Thank you. I would welcome the opportunity to debate, again, not only because it gives you all an informed opportunity to see your two options, discuss the issues, but any opportunity that I get to hear from you about what's important, I will take advantage of. So yes, I welcome the opportunity. If you organize them, invite me to them, call for them, I support that. I look forward to it. And maybe I'll have another first here in Franklin County.
Another one here? It's okay, don't worry about it. I said fast and loose process here. It's fine. Just make sure you state your name again, okay?
I'm Lainey Ullman. I'm from Goshen, Mass. And I just want to ask you, do you see this as a him or me contest? Is that what it's going to be? Do you see any other candidates coming into the field here?
Thank you. You know, you always hear rumors. You always hear rumors. People say, oh, well, maybe this will happen or maybe that will happen. Right now, my strategy is that I'm actually the only one who's declared her candidacy for this seat. I am effectively the only one campaigning for this seat. I have no reason to believe that the congressman will not run again. I have no reason to believe that he won't. And my strategy is to prepare myself as if that's the case. But I always have contingency plans in the back of my mind about what if it's not me or him, just me or him. So right now, this is what my strategy is, and this is who I'm viewing as the only competition right now. And we'll reevaluate if something should change.
Just state your name, what town.
I'm George Colin from Worthington. I had what I thought was a fairly straightforward question, which I'll get to, but I wanted to put it in the context of kind of deconstructing the contention that Mr. Neal is very senior on Ways and Means and can do a lot that you can't do as a first-term member. First of all, I want to say, I hope you're not the junior-most member. Hope there's a wave of blue candidates that turn the house, like 50 of them. So then you can contend for your slot among the 50.
That's right.
But my original question was, my earlier way of stating is, what committees are you interested in? But I want to put that in the context of how you can state how you would be effective and kind of reduce the gap from this construct or this myth that your opponent, primary opponent, is so powerful that he can do all this stuff that you couldn't do.
Yes, thank you. And when I sat with strategists and people who I just said, hey, what about this? One of the things is they said, well, he's on the Ways and Means Committee. But what does that matter to us, right? Again, why are we not the most on-point district in the country? I think he's the 7th or 8th most senior congressman currently sitting, maybe 6th, 7th, or 8th, something along the lines. Again, why aren't we well taken care of? And why do we have to wait for this promise of the future from him? 29 years of waiting is long enough. That's an entire generation. That's our children's entire lives. It's been too long. It's been too long. In terms of committees, I haven't really explored what committees that I'd be on. There are so many. I did look at them with one of our advisors, and I guess that's some of the fun homework that I'll do a little later. But I look forward to being involved. I've always been involved in every circle, whether it was in college or law school or as a lawyer, of rolling up my sleeves, branching out, working on a project, coming back to the bigger group and resolving that issue. I love that type of work. So I'd be interested in continuing to hear from you all about what committees you think are worthwhile. And also, I want to just restate that it is a little bit of a myth that just because you sit on this particular committee, that it's going to be beneficial. If you don't use your power for the people, then what does it matter? What does it matter? Yeah.
Just say who you are and what town. Dolores Root from Shelburne Center. You have a wonderful story. You're really impressive. You are speaking to the Franklin County continuing the political revolution started by Bernie Sanders. So we're a very sympathetic group for you to be speaking with. But as you also know, in Western Massachusetts, especially rural Western Massachusetts, you are really a very different kind of candidate. And so how do you see reaching out and being able to communicate with people whose first impulse would be to say, what? And what do you say to them that invites them to feel that you have something to give them?
So I like to think of myself not as being that much different, even though I know that my appearance is that much different. And I've had clients come into my office who I don't know what they were thinking based on my name, but then they'll come in and they'll be like, I have a friend who now he's a dear friend and client, but he said, when I first met you, I said, she's not for me. She's not for me. And I remember, and this was 6 years ago, I remember him sitting down in my office and I felt like the tension, but he had a pretty significant issue with an adult child happening. And he realized that I was for him. I was the one for him. And we stay in touch quite a lot. I have more commonalities with people than differences. You've heard all of the things that I've done, and with each of those things, there's another factor over which I can connect with people. And once people get past the shock, if they haven't already been prepared for what I look like or what how I dress, which part of having a good ground game means that people are not going to see this for the first time or not be prepared in some instance. But when you listen to them, that melts, that goes away. If they hear that you're there to help them, they're in the middle of a horrible domestic violence situation and they need help at a restraining order hearing, at that point, they don't care what I look like. They're happy to get the help. And I'm not naive. Again, with my team, we've mapped out where it's actually safe for me to go and where it might not be safe for me to go. And we realize that we have friends and allies and surrogates who will go where I may not be able to go without an advanced team. Right? I'm not afraid, and I'm definitely not afraid of my neighbors. And I'm understanding that I have to walk softly in some places, but that once we make that eye contact, and they hear my story, they hear my passion, and they hear that I have more in common with them than our current representative, than most representatives, then I'm confident that it will all melt away.
I think you have your new campaign motto, though. Tahirah, she's for us.
She's for us.
Okay. My name is Nancy Nelson. I'm actually from South Carolina, and I believe in Tahirah, so I came up to help out for a few weeks. But I'm curious to hear, a lot of you may have had that same reaction. What? What made you change your mind that you helped launch her today, a few weeks ago? And what changed your mind that you're here today supporting her? And I'll be happy to repeat it for you if you don't want to come up to the microphone. But I'd like to hear it directly from the people, because I know why I'm here, but I'd like to know why you're here. Yes.
I heard Tahirah speak at the rally in Northampton after Charlotte.
Okay. So you heard Tahirah speak at the rally where?
In Northampton after Charlottesville.
in Northampton after Charlottesville. What was the rally for?
It was a response to the white supremacy issue that was happening.
Okay.
And the death of Heather Hare.
Okay, so in response to the Charlottesville terror. Okay, who else and why are you here? Yes.
I came to hear her.
You came to hear her.
And she tells a very compelling story.
And she tells a very compelling story. And what? I'm sorry?
I had to hear her.
You had to hear her. And are you liking what you're hearing? Okay. And so, and what happened at the rally that caused you to like what she had to say?
I saw that she could hold a very diverse crowd.
She could hold a very diverse crowd.
And she could connect to people.
And she could connect to people.
She had a good sense of, and it was a huge crowd.
It was a huge crowd. So even though she looked like that, she was connecting to people. Okay.
It's a very diverse crowd, and she could connect to people and really unify.
And she unified that crowd. Okay. And that was a huge crowd. I watched it in the news. I had family members go and be a part of that as well. And you were raising your hand?
I just wanted to say that I'm maybe one of the few millennials here.
Okay, a millennial speaking.
And I saw that you were coming on Facebook.
Okay, saw on Facebook that she was coming, and that was it.
I read what you, the incredible, tireless work that you've done, and hearing so much more here, and
Okay.
I'm very grateful that you're willing to do this for us.
Where did you find out about the tireless work she had done?
On the description of the event, but mostly
Okay.
from coming here.
Oh,
Okay, so due to the description of the event, coming here, and you're liking what you're hearing as well. Okay. Yeah. That's right. Millennials are important. If you can get them out to vote, that could be the difference that'll beat the 17%, right? Yes, ma'am. And you're actually close enough. I can give this.
Well, I'm here because you're a woman of color, a Muslim, and you're the pink wave.
Thank you. That's right.
That's awesome. Yes. I'm going to give the microphone back to Tahirah, but I was just curious if I wanted to see, am I wasting my time? And I don't think so. I really don't think so. And I thank all of you who did answer and wanted to answer.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Yolanda Cancel. I do a lot of work in the Springfield area, but I've worked countrywide as an organizer in different levels, unions, and different things. When I first heard of Tahirah, I loved everything that she had to say. And but as a lesbian woman, when I first looked, I only looked at the picture and not who she was at first. So growing up in Boston, it was the Muslim life and, in the mosque, they were not so friendly to people in my lifestyle. And so at first, as I had this, I love what she said, and I would follow the videos, and I remember walking into a door because I'm listening to her, and I'm like walking into the door, I'm like, goodness, I wish that, I could be a part of that. But when I met her, she didn't, all that stigma, everything, all that just went out of the door. And as, being part of the union, and I've walked for Richie Nail, done different things for him, and, I got that phone call, hey, Yolanda, it's that time of the year. And I says, you know what? Campaign Richie Nail, I am, sorry, buddy, I'm going the other way this time around. I got that kind of Asha's, well, why don't you want to stick with him, because she's going to win. He's got the money, he's got the budget, he's got the strategy, he's got everything. She's not going to win. She's wasting her time. At that point, I knew, I really don't want you guys now. Now you gave me the power to want to run. So, and before that, I remember coming out of an organizational meeting, Springfield Women's Organized. We're doing the March 8th, International Women's Day, so we're planning on that, all right, for us. And I get this inbox just leaving out, and this messenger, and she says, hey, I'm thinking about running for Richie Nail. My whole car went, the light went green, red, I got beeping horns, and I'm just like, I don't even know what GIF to send her at this point. And so even though my union and everything else, and I know who they're going to go for, I'm here. This is the badge I'm wearing right now.
I appreciate you.
You raised your hand, you had a question? Yep, you, yep.
No, I was going to answer the question about what changed our mind.
Oh, you're welcome to if you want to do that.
I'll just make a comment.
Okay, you want to just, okay. It's just easier for the world to hear you. The whole world's listening.
No pressure.
Just say who you are, where you're from.
Sarah from Buckland. And it was actually, this was in response to your question earlier about what changed our minds and made us want to come here. And I just wanted to affirm to you that we didn't all necessarily change our minds to be here. Some of us became aware of you, saw you, and said, yes. So you need to know that we didn't all have to have our minds changed to be here.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I actually have a question. Does anyone else have a question at this second? I wanted to ask you, thank you for bringing up unions, because that was going to be my question. So we know, especially in FCCPR, know that unions are the best mechanism to balance power between the employer and the employee, to be able to bargain over our rights, our wages, and fair working conditions. What's your position on organized labor, particularly since there's a Supreme Court decision that is coming up that will effectively gut public sector unions by the loss of agency fee. Agency fee is just a fee that you pay to enforce the contract. So it's an important battle that we're waging now. Not that we have much to wage at this point, only the preservation of unions. So what is your position on unions?
I support unions. When I was at Western Mass Legal Services before the name change, it was our union that helped to secure a pretty decent enough salary. I told you I had taken a significant pay cut from paralegal to attorney, and it was the union that negotiated a package for newer attorneys that made it less painful. And I got to see the union at work. I got to be involved in it, so I appreciate union work. Also, with the current administration, we see that the power imbalance between employees and the employers, the power imbalance is widening. And so now more than ever, we need strong unions because they represent the ability to keep the worker safe, keep the worker free from harassment and retribution and retaliation. So I do support strong unions and would be looking to work and continue to work with unions. Working for myself, I don't have to worry about that, but it made an impression on me when I was at Legal Services, the importance of the work for unions. Because not only did we negotiate for salary, but also for our benefit package as well. And again, you heard about my experience in corporate America. It wasn't until working for Legal Services that I got that experience. And it's just again, it's so interesting how these little pieces of my life have come together to give me such a broad set of experience and skills.
Okay, not dominating, but I had one other question. Richie Neal's not my congressman. Jim McGovern is, and Jim McGovern focuses pretty heavily on poverty. And my particular interest is in childhood poverty. There are too many kids in this country that don't even eat, forget about one meal. I mean, 3 meals, they don't even eat 1 meal. So what's your position on, obviously I know what your position is on childhood hunger, but what kinds of strategies would you enlist to sort of combat the ongoing issue?
The issues of poverty are so complex. It's funny, because Karen and I were talking about this when we were going up to an event the other day. We were talking about how poverty is actually a reflection sometimes of generational disparity in wealth. And how you can't just say to people, save $5 a week and you'll get out of it. We really have to talk about systemic and institutionalized disparity that's resulted in poverty for many people. And in the more immediate sense, though, I'm all in favor of a strong agricultural bill, because it's through those sorts of bills that address poverty not only in the rural communities, but also in the inner city. Because it's through the rural communities through the farm bills that we look for assistance with food stamps and SNAP to make sure that children are eating, and programs that feed them during the summer. was talking to a family the other day, and they said, well, our school district doesn't like to cancel for snow days because the principal is concerned that the children may not eat. At least we are talking about it. A couple of years ago, we would shame people who were in poverty. We would shame people whose kids didn't eat and make it look like their fault. At least now we're able to understand and not pass judgment, but we're going to work towards a solution that makes it known to families that it's not your fault. It's not that there's anything wrong with you. It's that it's in our system, and we have to talk about it, and we have to address it in a number of the ways that we talked about today. The answer is there.
Hi, Alan Singer, still from Conway. So my question to you is, every Student Succeeds Act going into law in Massachusetts, effective this coming August, it replaces No Child Left Behind. It was signed originally in the Obama administration. It's been co-opted now by the current administration and the White House, especially Education Secretary DeVos, that is going to require, everything is extremely test score centric. And now what this administration wants to do is give parents who might be having children, they can afford it, but also just get voucher money, public money, to send their children to private schools, including non-secular private schools, which means that there's now the merging of church and state. So my question to you is, where do you stand on that? And I personally, I find it offensive, but thank you.
I have 7 kids. I don't know if I've ever actually said. At some point, I stopped telling you along the way how many kids I had at each milestone. But I have 7 of them. The youngest one is 4. The oldest is 24. And our kids have gone through every type of school system, from a very nice prep school to a school choice public school to a charter school to the Springfield public school. And they all have their strengths and they all have their weaknesses. But what I think makes most sense is a strong public school system so that people don't have to have the grass is greener on the other side type of perspective. And part of how we get to a strong public school system is that we give people options even within that. So if you have students who have medical issues or accessibility issues, then we provide them opportunities to do online learning through their local public school and come in and use the school and the school system and sports as they see fit. Once we make sure that our students can take advantage of every aspect of what our tax-paying dollars are going for to pay for our kids, then we don't have to be lured by the charter schools whose own accountabilities gone up and down. In the beginning, it was really strong, and now it's sort of tapered off, and it's not serving us, and nobody is succeeding. In terms of high-stakes testing, one of my kids has a mild learning disability, and he would come home crying sometime from the stress of what was happening in those prep courses. And again, like I had said about looking at students for who they are as individuals and giving them alternative options to succeed is not lowering our standards, it's increasing access, and the children can survive without that level of pressure. And we have to recognize that not every child has the same ability to succeed using standardized testing as their neighbors. And that, again, we're talking about institutional types of disparity. It's not a secret. It's not a secret that those testing modules will increase and widen gaps in achievement and success. We have to talk about it. We have to push back against it. And we have to advocate for our children in a way that doesn't shame them or their families for asking for those workarounds.
So if there aren't any other further questions, last call for a question? Do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it was great. I think I did well for my first official Meet the Candidate. I want to thank you for your hospitality and for welcoming me. I want to thank you for seriously considering your options. I want to ask you that if you believe that I have something to offer, that you continue to reach out to me. Sign up on our mailing list. Send me an email. If you think there's something I need to know, a place I need to be, or a person I need to see, do not hesitate to call me and suggest it. Join my task force. Help me help you. Hopefully by now you're all at least signed up so you can stay abreast. Check the Facebook page. It is interesting. We try to keep it vibrant. We try to keep the website vibrant as well. I'm also sensitive to the fact that that because people have internet accessibility issues, I was doing videos, and I do a lot of videos, but I'm going to start doing written notes also online so that it's easier to access for people who may not be able to download. So I'm learning, and I'm eager to hear more. The primary is September 4th. We have to let people know that that is a do or die date, and that it's by design, and we have, again, it's institutional, and again, it's just one of the barriers, it's one of the systemic barriers to keep our vote suppressed. We're going to push through that. There's early voting, there's absentee voting. So when we're sending the kids off to college, we're going to have the conversation with them about doing their ballot. If you have 18-year-olds or 17-year-olds in your life, as they turn 18, make sure they get registered to vote. That's super important. Continue to support this organization, continue to support other organizations. Amplify, don't hesitate to ask questions. And I'm very, very grateful and inspired by you and your civic engagement. So thank you all again for having me. Thank you.
Is that yours? So just before you leave, come on, don't leave, you're going to ruin my speech. So on behalf of FCCPR, I would like to once again thank you, Tahirah. You're really a rock star. Thank you to Mary Malmrose and our co-sponsors. I also want to thank all of you for participating in this really important civic event. Regarding our endorsement process, I did mention I was going to speak to it briefly. Our candidate recommendation committee consists of at least one, hopefully, member of each of the task forces. We meet to interview candidates who wish to have the endorsement of FCCPR. Our committee then offers a recommendation to either endorse or not to the full membership. The membership is then encouraged to vote. The candidates are notified of those results. The committee recently interviewed Tahirah and are enthusiastically recommending an endorsement. The membership will have an opportunity to vote on that endorsement on or before our next General Assembly, February 11th. You're all welcome to come. And only members who are dues-paying members who are active, up to date as of 2018 are eligible to vote. So we please encourage you. You can join today, and that will make you officially eligible to vote. Table right in the back. We also have some interesting swag to buy. And yeah, we will vote online. We will vote online and in person during our General Assembly. So we offer a couple of ways for members to vote. And FCCPR takes our endorsement process very seriously, as our endorsement doesn't simply end with a declaration of support. Members of FCCPR volunteer their time and energy ensuring that whoever we endorse wins. During this past municipal election, for example, FCCPR members volunteered countless hours creating and maintaining voter lists, knocking on doors, organizing and participating in phone banks during both the persuasion phase and the get out the vote period. Our successes during the most recent Greenfield municipal elections is evidence that when we organize, we win. I want to close by encouraging all of you, as I said, to join FCCPR. It's the most incredible organization I've ever belonged to. It is the thing. $10 a year buys you all the activism you're ever going to need. And lastly, please, if you're not registered to vote, do so. And we have registration information and your ability to register right back there. And if your neighbor isn't registered to vote, especially young people, encourage them to do so, unless, of course, they're Republican, then you can leave that out. Now, more than ever before, we need to resist, and we need to respond by mobilizing everywhere, anywhere, any way that we can. Thank you for coming.